Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy? Sports and Fitness Rants. I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Got another great video for you guys today. As usual, you guys know the deal on this channel. We must continue to set the record straight, stop the lies, stop the narratives, stop them from rewriting the history, guys. You know what I'm saying? Hold these guys accountable. Hold them to the standard. We must continue to stand up. And in this video, we're going to talk about who were the toughest defenders against Michael Jordan. Like, who were his toughest matchups, like as far as defenders go? Who guarded Michael Jordan best? We're going to talk about in this video. We're going to talk about some of these guys, man, that don't really get much mention, from back in them days, man. The guys, like I said, that made Michael Jordan work, man. We're going to talk about in this video, guys. And I want to thank you guys, man, everyone across the world, everyone across the states that's been supporting my channel, man. I'm truly humbled, guys, for real. Truly humbled by all the support, man. You guys emailing me stuff, man. You guys hitting me up on the other platforms. You guys commenting on my videos, subscribing to my channel. And like I said, guys, I'm truly humbled. Remember, this is not about me, making you believe or convincing you that Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time. This is not about that, right? It's about setting the record straight about Michael Jordan, giving you guys the facts, and then you guys form your own opinion. It doesn't matter if you believe Michael Jordan's the greatest or not. I will not stand for the lies any longer. I will not do it. And you guys know that. This is why you guys are rolling with me. You guys know what it's about. It's about the facts. It's about the truth. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, guys, like I said, man, remember, this is never about me convincing you about how Michael Jordan, how great he is, or that he's the greatest of all time. I'm not giving you guys narratives. I'm not giving you guys lies. I'm not bending reality here, guys. I'm not rewriting the history when I talk to you guys about Michael Jordan and the past eras that I grew up watching, the 80s and the 90s specifically. It's not about that stuff, guys. These are the facts here. I'm giving you guys the facts, right? From the perspective of someone who grew up watching this. I'm telling you guys right now, and you form your opinion off of that. Remember, your opinion can never be based off of lies and narratives. You'll never have a good opinion off of that. Right? You can only form a really educated opinion when you have all the facts, right? All the facts, guys, the truth. And everything that I tell you on this channel is backed up through the video footage, guys. Those are the facts. It's there. And remember, in this video, we're going to talk about who were the toughest defenders against Michael Jordan, who made Michael Jordan work and earn it on the basketball court. Now, I've told you guys many times, man, that it wasn't about the name on the back of the jersey for Michael Jordan. Right? It didn't matter if he was going against Jeff Hornacek or Joe Dumars. It did not matter. He was going to bring his A game. He was going to bring it because he knew they were going to bring it because of his reputation. He was Michael Jordan. So Michael Jordan had to bring his A game all the time. He couldn't just lollygag and go through the motions. Michael Jordan was going to be guarded by the other team's best perimeter player. They were going to rotate defenders on him. He was going to get double and triple teamed. All of these things, the zone defenses, Michael Jordan faced it all, guys. Faced it all. So when we talk about who are the toughest defenders, I don't want to focus on the guys that we know about, right? A lot of us know about the all-time great defensive players that Michael Jordan went against in his career, especially in that mid to late 80s, right? When he came in the league with some of these really great defensive players were there. Guys like Dennis Johnson, right? The Michael Coopers, right? These guys were established veterans when Michael Jordan came in. But he also came in with guys like Alvin Robertson, right? The Joe Dumars, right? Some of these elite defensive players, the Gary Paytons. These are guys that you know, right? These are household names. These guys have either won Defensive Player of the Year awards, or these guys are perennial all-defensive team members, right? All-time great defensive players. When you talk about guys like the Joe Dumars, the Gary Paytons, the Dennis Johnsons, the Michael Coopers, the Alvin Robertsons. These are all-time great perimeter defensive players that Michael Jordan battled against in the mid to late 80s, going into the 90s. But for me, I want to focus on a couple of players in this video, and I want to name some guys that I remember growing up watching that made Michael Jordan earn it. Because a lot of these guys, once again, you may not know these names. These aren't the big-time names that you would think about, right? These are some of the other guys. Like I said, there wasn't about the name on the back of the jersey. So, like I said, I just mentioned some guys, right? I mentioned guys like Dennis Johnson and Alvin Robertson, Michael Cooper. But when we think about some of the great defensive players against Michael Jordan, you think about guys like a Sidney Moncrief, right? When Michael Jordan first came into the league, right? That mid to late 80s, another great defensive player, Sidney Moncrief. We think about guys like I said, a Nick Anderson, a Vernon Maxwell, a Dan Marley, a Jeff Hornacek, Hersey Hawkins, a Nate McMillan. I wrote some of these guys' names down just so I didn't forget them. But for me, when we talk about some of those guys I just mentioned, these are all solid defensive players. Dan Marley, who's, he's underrated because he's a white guy. But Thunder Dan was a multiple-time all-defensive team member. And like I said, the dude gave the effort and gave the intensity on the defensive end, man. Thunder Dan. He was, like I said, he was a solid defensive player, man. Like I said, he played Michael Jordan tough, man. So shout out to him. But also guys like Hersey Hawkins, who always seemed to play with a scowl on his face. Shout out to Hersey Hawkins, man, who was, like I said, a sniper from shooting. And he, like I said, he was a solid defensive player, man. He gave the effort on the defensive end. These guys showed up against Michael Jordan. They knew that. Guys like Vernon Maxwell, you've heard guys like Vernon Maxwell talking about losing sleep the night before they were going to play a Michael Jordan team because they knew he was going to bring it. These guys lost sleep playing against Michael Jordan, right? That's how intense and how much of a competitor Michael Jordan was. They knew if they didn't bring it, this guy would go out there and drop 50, 60 on them and talk to him while he's doing it. That was part of going against Michael Jordan. Not only did you have to deal with the on-court game, right, his skills, his athleticism, you had to deal with the mind games, the trash talk. Legendary trash talk from a Michael Jordan, guys. Nate McMillan, another solid defensive perimeter player in the 90s, multiple-time all-defender. Nate McMillan, right? We think about, who's the other guy I wrote down here? Dennis Rodman, another all-time great defensive player that guarded Michael Jordan several times when the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls would match up. A lot of people forget when the Bulls were getting beat by the Pistons in 88 and 89 in 1990. Dennis Rodman was a Defensive Player of the Year award winner in 1990, right? Multiple times all-defender team member to go along with a Joe Dumars. So you had two of the all-time great defensive players on one team in that era, not to mention guys like Bill Laimbeer and James Edwards and John Sally, who were big bodies. You know, a guy like a John Sally, a shot blocker. These guys were intimidators. They were enforcers. But for me, there were certain guys I wanted to mention as the great defensive players. Now, we know that Michael Jordan has labeled Joe Dumars. He's said many times that Joe Dumars, he felt, guarded him the best, was the toughest matchup he had to go against. Joe Dumars, and that says a lot. Michael Jordan giving props to a Joe Dumars. But what will the LeBron James fans and some of these haters say? They'll try to tear down Michael Jordan by saying that Michael Jordan played against shorter defensive players. Meanwhile, how many videos, how many photos do we have of LeBron James being guarded by J.J. Barea, or Jason Kidd, or Steph Curry, a Klay Thompson, an Andre Iguodala, a Tony Parker? All these guys are shorter than LeBron James. They're smaller than LeBron James. And they've guarded LeBron James in the finals. And none of those guys I mentioned are as great a defensive players as a Joe Dumars or some of these other guys that I mentioned. So let's think about this now. To me, Joe Dumars might be the greatest defensive player against Michael Jordan. It might be a Joe Dumars. But the guys that I remember watching throughout the 90s, that I remember making Michael Jordan work for it, earn it, were guys like Gerald Wilkins. So shout out to Gerald Wilkins, the Jordan stopper, right? AKA the Jordan stopper. You guys remember the Cleveland Cavaliers brought Gerald Wilkins in from the New York Knicks in the 1993 NBA playoffs. I believe it was the 1993 NBA playoffs. They brought in a Gerald Wilkins to guard Michael Jordan in the postseason. You guys remember, Michael Jordan was routinely guarded by guys like Craig Elo and Ron Harper on those early Cleveland Cavaliers teams in the late 80s into the early 90s. But then when Ron Harper was traded away, they brought in a Gerald Wilkins to be the Jordan stopper because Gerald Wilkins was known for making Michael Jordan earn it. I watched Gerald Wilkins, right, 1991, 1992 on the New York Knicks, guarding a Michael Jordan, making Michael Jordan earn it. These guys gave the effort. Gerald Wilkins was a great athlete, right? He's the brother, the younger brother of a Dominique Wilkins. No, he wasn't the high flyer of Dominique like that, but he was a very good athlete, and he was a high flyer. And like I said, he gave the effort, man. He was about 6'7", so he was a little bit bigger than Michael Jordan. Like I said, he was physical with Michael Jordan. He made him work, man. These guys watched film on Michael Jordan. They studied film of Michael Jordan to better defend him, right? To learn his tendencies, the spots he'd like to be on the court. These are the things that Joe Wilkins would do when you watch Joe Wilkins guard Michael Jordan. This guy made him earn it. No, he wasn't shutting Michael Jordan down to 10 points or 7 points or something like that. That's not what it was about for these guys. You wanted Michael Jordan to take more shots to get his points. That's how you made Michael Jordan earn it. That's how you made him work. That's how you were effective defensively against a Michael Jordan. Make him take 25, 30 shots to get his 30 points, right? You don't want Michael Jordan going, 15 of 21 and dropping 40-some points on you guys. Yeah, if Michael Jordan scored 28, 30 points, but he had to take 30 shots to get it, that's a win for a Joe Wilkins. So shout out to Joe Wilkins, a guy that doesn't get mentioned much. I've mentioned him many times on my channel because he was a very hard-nosed, scrappy is a good way to describe him, defensive player. So shout out to Joe Wilkins, man. I thought he always guarded Michael Jordan very well. He made him earn it and work for it. How about John Starks? To me, John Starks was another guy. Played for the New York Knicks in those 90s, right? Those really solid New York Knicks teams of the 90s. Right? When Joe Wilkins left after the 92 season, John Starks became the main defensive player on Michael Jordan, guys. And John Starks played with the same kind of grit, the heart, right? The scrappiness of a Joe Wilkins. He didn't have the size of a Joe Wilkins. I believe John Starks was about 6'4". But he was, like I said, just as tough, if not tougher, on Michael Jordan than a Joe Wilkins, than many other players who may have had more athleticism, may have been more skilled. Maybe these guys had more defensive team selections. Maybe this, maybe that. But John Starks guarded Michael Jordan just as great as anybody else could guard Michael Jordan in that early 90s, the mid-90s, man. 92, 93. It was John Starks, man. He was one of the solid defensive players against Michael Jordan. If you go back and you watch the 1993 Eastern Conference Finals, the Chicago Bulls versus the New York Knicks, where the Chicago Bulls would go down 2-0, right? To the New York Knicks, the number 1 seed New York Knicks. It was guys like John Starks that was really giving Michael Jordan a problem out there because what John Starks was doing was anticipating Michael Jordan's moves. I told you, these guys studied film so much so that they could guess where Michael Jordan was going to go. And oftentimes in those first 2 games, you'll see John Starks guessing right against Michael Jordan, anticipating Michael Jordan's move or his crossover or his hesitation. And you'll see John Starks, you'll see it in the video, guys. John Starks was amazing. Michael Jordan made adjustments, and the rest is history. But John Starks made Michael Jordan work and earn it. But what will the detractors say? Oh, John Starks was nobody. He's only 6'4". He was bagging groceries before he came into the NBA. All that does is highlight the heart, the grit, the effort, right? The competitive fire within a John Starks to go from packing groceries to going in the NBA, guarding Michael Jordan, and doing a solid job at it. Earning the respect of the New York Knicks fans. To this day, John Starks is well respected by the New York Knicks fans because of the way he approached the game, the effort he gave against the greatest player of the era. John Starks, shout out to him. Another guy I want to shout that never gets mentioned, Jeff Malone. I want to shout Jeff Malone. You guys probably don't know who Jeff Malone. Listen, my people know. The subscribers to my channel know who Jeff Malone is. But a lot of the newer age fans, even if you're a fan of Michael Jordan, you may not know who Jeff Malone is. No, he didn't make a whole bunch of all-defensive teams. I don't think he ever made the all-defensive team, Jeff Malone. No, he's not some all-time great Hall of Fame player. None of these things. Like I said, you probably don't even know. Not Karl Malone. They're not related. Jeff Malone. I watched Jeff Malone give Michael Jordan fits many times out there. Now, early in Michael Jordan's career, Jeff Malone played for the Washington Bullets. And the Washington Bullets in the mid-'80s, they were known as one of the tough defensive teams of that time, guys. The Milwaukee Bucks, the Washington Bullets were a very tough defensive team with guys like Jeff Ruland, Rick Mahorn, and a Jeff Malone. They were very scrappy. As a matter of fact, you guys remember Michael Jordan's very first game of his career. He got put on his backside by Jeff Ruland, right? Michael Jordan came in and tried to dunk it, and Jeff Ruland hit him with the body, and Michael Jordan fell back hard around his back, man. First game of the season against the Washington Bullets. But Jeff Malone also played for the Utah Jazz. When guys like Mark Eaton was there, Karl Malone, John Stockton, you had a Jeff Malone there. And Jeff Malone played Michael Jordan very tough, guys. Very tough. You know, sometimes you'll hear people say, hey, well, this guy wasn't that great because I saw this player lock him down, or I saw this player give him a hard time. And they'll make it seem as if because that player wasn't a really great defensive player or known for being a great defender, that takes away from that player. So if I tell people that Jeff Malone gave Michael Jordan fits, some of these fake fans who don't know about the history of the game, they'll think that that's exposing Michael Jordan. It's not. Because what I've told you guys many times, man, it's never been about the name on the back of the jersey. These guys were going to bring their A game to Michael Jordan. And someone like Jeff Malone was scrappy. He had a big body. He was about 6'5", about 220. He was thick. And like I said, man, he played physical with Michael Jordan. Remember, these guys were allowed to use their physicality against the smaller Michael Jordan at 190, 200 pounds. So someone like a Jeff Malone could be physical, and he would make Michael Jordan work. So shout out to Jeff Malone, who never gets mentioned, but he was a very scrappy defensive player. I said, specifically, especially against Michael Jordan. I saw him make Michael Jordan work and earn it. So shout out to Jeff Malone. Shout out to Craig Elo. Another guy, I mentioned him earlier. Just shout out to all those guys, man. I think I mentioned all these guys, man. Nick Anderson, like I said, Jeff Hornacek. Shout out to Jeff Hornacek. These guys made Michael Jordan work. And Gary Payton. I thought Gary Payton was a very effective defensive player against Michael Jordan. Now, these are some of the guys I know off the top of my head, guys. I know you could probably think of other players that played in that time or guys that you remember giving Michael Jordan a hard time. Maybe someone like a Latrell Sprewell I've seen give Michael Jordan some fits in those late 90s Bulls teams. Latrell Sprewell was a young player. But to me, those were the guys. A Joe Wilkins, a John Starks, a Gary Payton, a Jeff Malone. Like, these guys, man, the Joe Dumarses, those are the guys to me that I watched on a nightly basis that always usually made Michael Jordan work and earn it, man. So shout out to all those guys, man. Because, there's nothing we have to think about, guys, when it comes to these defensive players that I've mentioned back in them days, the 80s and the 90s. A lot of these defensive players against Michael Jordan, not only were they allowed to use their physicality against him because that was the way the game was played, right? They were able to use their hand checks and the forearms and all this stuff. But they were also allowed to be super aggressive on Michael Jordan because of the way the game was, the players that were in the game back then. So, for example, Joe Dumars on the Detroit Pistons could be overly aggressive against Michael Jordan at times. Maybe take gambles, take chances. Like I said, be overly aggressive on a Michael Jordan. Really overplay him, all these things. And why could he do this? Because he knew he had guys like Dennis Rodman behind him, John Sally, Bill Laimbeer. These guys were going to be there in the paint to challenge Michael Jordan. So even if Joe Dumars is overplaying Michael Jordan on the perimeter and he's being super aggressive, even if Michael Jordan beats him off the dribble, whatever the case may be, now Michael Jordan has to go into the teeth of the defense against the Rodmans and the Laimbeers and deal with the elbows and the forearms and all this other nonsense that was going on back in them days. Right? It's the same thing for Dennis Johnson, right? We think about Michael Jordan scoring all those points against Dennis Johnson in the 86 playoffs, right? Dennis Johnson, one of the elite defensive point guards in the history of the game. Those long arms, 6'4", the great instincts of a Dennis Johnson. But when you look at that game and you think about that game against the Chicago Bulls, Dennis Johnson was allowed to overplay Michael Jordan several times out there, be super aggressive on Michael Jordan on the perimeter. Because why is this? First, the Boston Celtics were one of the top defensive teams in the league in '86. If not, I believe they might have been the #1 defensive rated team in the league. And why was that? Because you had guys like Dennis Johnson on the perimeter, but you also had really good defensive players like Kevin McHale down low with those big long arms, man. So you had guys like Robert Parrish down low. You had Larry Bird, who was an excellent help defensive player, an excellent team defender. You had guys like Danny Ainge, the Bill Waltons coming off the bench. These are the players you had on the team. So if Michael Jordan beats Dennis Johnson on the perimeter, now he has to deal with Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Larry Bird, the Bill Waltons. This is what happens back in them days, guys. Same thing with a John Starks on the perimeter. Michael Jordan's playing against the New York Knicks. John Starks could be really aggressive on Michael Jordan from time to time because you had the Charles Oakleys behind you, the Anthony Masons, the Patrick Ewings back there, anchoring the defense. So even if he beats you off the dribble, now you're in the teeth of the defense. Now you have to worry about getting clobbered. This is the way it went, guys. These are the facts. These are the facts. Jeff Malone, same thing, right? You get past Jeff Malone on Utah, now you're dealing with Karl Malone, Mark Eaton down low. That's the way the game was played, guys. Right? Think about some of these guys on the perimeter. They had backup behind them. There were legit big men back there. Legit big men. You think about Alvin Robertson, some of these other guys, man, that were really solid, great defensive perimeter guys, the Michael Coopers, man. But to me, the Gary Paytons, Joe Dumars, John Starks, Joe Wilkins, the Jeff Malones, these guys guarded Michael Jordan excellent, man. I told you, it wasn't always about the name on the back of the jersey. Michael Jordan brought his A game. You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.